Welcome to Tuesday. Everybody should say hi to Leroy for me and thank him again for covering this class for me for the week. Today we're going to continue with our learning targets in Unit 3, learning target 3, 4, 5, and 8 on the 4 macromolecules. We've already finished carbohydrates, so today with Leroy you guys are going to be covering lipids. So if you don't have your note packet out already, please do so, or whatever you're planning to use to take notes. I do expect that everybody writes something down today, no matter how you prefer to take notes. So we're going to use the same format as yesterday. First we're going to talk about structure, function, then we're going to give some examples, and you'll do a little bit of drawing, and then we'll talk about how these things interact with our cells or our bodies and participate in homeostasis. So lipids, their structure is that they are made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and sometimes phosphorus. Another name for the lipids is the fats. So these are fats that can form rings of steroids. They can be long chains of fat, or they can attach to other chemical groups. All fats are typically nonpolar, so that means that lipids do not dissolve in water. So the old expression, they don't mix like oil and water, that is true. So if you've ever seen oils, whether it's cooking oil or motor oil or anything else like that, floating on water, it's because they are lipids. Some examples of lipids. The three that I'm going to ask you to really know well for this class are phospholipids, saturated fats, and unsaturated fats. So phospholipids are probably the most important one. So if you want to put a little highlighter around that or underline these in some way so that you'll remember to study this one the most. Phospholipids are made of a fatty acid, which are these long chains coming off down here, and they're attached to a glycerol up here, this rounded part. And that gives them a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. If you remember from our water chemistry, hydrophilic means water-loving. This end of a phospholipid is attracted to water. Hydrophobic means water-fearing. So the tails of this phospholipid hate water, which seems really like a confused molecule. One end loves water, one end hates water, but this is actually a really important property, and I'll show you why in just a second. Saturated fats are fatty acid chains, so the same kinds of chains as you find right down here at the bottom of a phospholipid, but a saturated fat is going to be all by itself, and it's just a very simple chain of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens, and it only has single bonds. So if you look very closely between all of these carbons, you'll see only one single line. That single line means that there's a single bond between those carbons. Because of that, we say that they're completely saturated. There's nothing else for them to reach out and grab onto. These are all solid at room temperature. So fats that would be solid at room temperature would include the fatty part of meat, the white part of meat. It would include butter, things like that. Unsaturated fats are fatty acid chains that have double bonds. So you can see right here in the center, there's a double bond, and that gives this kind of a kinked structure. It's going to cause it to bend. These are fats that are liquid at room temperature, so things like olive oil or corn oil, vegetable oil, plant-based fats tend to be unsaturated fats. Good way to remember that these are going to stack up and be solid, and these are going to be liquid, is to think about a whole bunch of paper. If you had nice flat sheets of paper like this saturated fat here, you could stack it up really high and it would stay a solid tower of paper. However, if you had a whole bunch of crumpled papers, like this crumpled up unsaturated fat, and you tried to stack it up, that's going to keep tumbling down. It's going to act more like a liquid and be more flowy or more mobile. So I told you that I was going to expand a little bit more on what phospholipids look like. So on this slide, I showed you just a simple little cartoon, which is all I need you to draw for your notes. But the real chemistry, as you can see, we've got this great big head, which has a glycerol and a phosphate group attached. That's why it has the name phospholipid, because the phosphate. We've got a chain here of saturated fat and a chain here of unsaturated fat. So these are nonpolar. These don't like water. But this end is totally okay with water. So if you throw these into a bucket of water, what's going to happen is that they're going to arrange back to back. All of the parts that are afraid of water are going to buddy up across from each other so that they don't have to touch the water. And they're protected by these heads that are hydrophilic, that parts that love water. And when they arrange themselves this way, that makes all of our cell membranes in every living thing. So the function of lipids, they are going to be used for long-term storage of energy, so our saturated and unsaturated fats. That's how we store all of our blubber and long-term energy. Your nice fat layer around different parts of um, your body or different parts of meat that you might eat. Lipids are also used as hormones and cell signals, so things like estrogen, testosterone, and all of your lovely hormones that cause puberty, those are lipid-based hormones. And then cell membranes, like I just mentioned on the previous slide, phospholipids are the ones that make up all the cell membranes of the cells in every living thing. So how do these help us with homeostasis? We use lipids to keep us balanced in a lot of different ways. So I've got 3 examples here. There are plenty more, but these are the 3 we can focus on for now. First one is with cholesterol. You need cholesterol to help lubricate your blood vessels, your arteries and veins, to help blood flow through smoothly. But if your cholesterol levels get out of control, if they get too high with the wrong kinds of cholesterol, it can actually clog your arteries, and then you will have blood flow problems that can lead to things like heart attacks and strokes. By balancing out our estrogen and testosterone, we can regulate all the levels of hormones that happen during puberty. So too much of one and you're going to be in trouble, too much of another, you're going to be in trouble. So they're constantly regulating each other out. And then with cell membranes, that phospholipid barrier that you guys saw right here, this phospholipid barrier, as you can see, it's flexible, so it can allow some things through, but it's also a thick barrier that doesn't allow everything through. So that protects our cells, allows us to bring in just what we need and nothing more.